it is almost the 59th minute of the 11th hour, but there is now a deal in principle between Democrat and Republican leaders in Washington to resolve the US debt crisis. It goes to the first votes in Congress shortly. Both houses must approve the deal by Tuesday midnight. Reached late on Sunday, the deal raises the debt ceiling by up to $2.4 trillion. It would cut the US budget deficit by a similar amount. A bipartisan commission will seek further changes. Well, let's look at where the US debt stands right now. $14,293,930,000,000 and the rest on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll report the change in the next 25 minutes of this program. Stay tuned. Live to Washington. And let's join our guest now, who is joining us from Washington, from Congress, to Brian Beutler, reporter for Talking Points Memo. Brian, thanks for joining us. What's your reading of the politics? The leaders believe they've got this in place, but are there still a lot of others that have to be whipped into shape?
It seems like this will probably go through okay. The one recent development we've had over here is that the House of Representatives, our lower chamber, where this is going to be a tougher sell, they're going to vote first. I think that gives them sort of less of a time to have a freak out and maybe for votes to slip off and for the bill to fail. So the House will go first, and then the Senate, where passage is pretty much assured at this point, they'll go much later tonight or maybe tomorrow. So politically, this thing seems pretty much locked in. Given that this is politics and pretty much anything could happen.
Brian, what's your analysis of what has unfolded in the last few hours to get this deal? The compromises and the reluctance, particularly on the wings of both parties.
Well, I think what happened is you had this really dangerous brinksmanship happening here last week with the Speaker of our House and the Democratic leaders of both parties sort of edging closer and closer and closer to default with him. And the issue became so perilous that the president stepped in with the minority leader of the Senate to figure out a way to give everybody enough cover to vote for a package. This was actually a deal that didn't really please Democratic leaders in the Senate and the House, but it's one that I think the president made a calculation was necessary to avoid that previous brinksmanship from triggering a debt default. So that means that you're going to see defections from the liberal wings of the Democratic Party and the conservative wings of the Republican Party. But that's ultimately what this was always going to take to get through to avoid that default.
Brian, did it need brinkmanship on the 5th, or is this a deal which could have been done a few weeks ago and calmed the markets and certainly not left the threat of degrading the rating of America's debt?
This was an optional brinksmanship. It, in the past, has always happened as a matter of routine. And months ago, Republicans forecasted that they weren't going to allow it to be a matter of routine. And for whatever reason, the president didn't make a big fuss at the outset to say absolutely not. We always do this, and it's too dangerous to play around with. And once that dynamic was locked into place, we were stuck with it. And so I'd say maybe 4 or 5 months ago it would have been possible to have avoided all of this. But once it was locked in, you were going to have this brinksmanship to get to basically concentrate everybody's minds on the key issue, which was avoiding debt default.
Finally, who has won in this battle of brinkmanship and who has suffered? Have the Tea Party gained or not?
I'd say Republican leaders have suffered in that they've had to come to terms with the fact that there are big swaths within their party that don't trust them, that are much more conservative than them, that don't trust the Washington establishment. They have an inherently difficult dynamic in passing any important or must-pass legislation, and I think that it's sort of a difficult walloping for much of the Democratic Party, which is playing on a legislative turf that has been defined almost entirely by the other party. So even if many of them will vote for the plan and many of them think that it's a fair compromise, they really sort of wish the discussion could be elsewhere, because you have a reeling economy, and the last place they really actually want to be is talking about austerity measures.
Brian Beutler from Talking Points Memo. Brian, thanks for sparing time to join us here on BBC World News. Well, let's now go